What's up, everybody? Today I am doing my ranking of the Nightmare Room series by R.L. Stine. And I first started reading through this series a couple years ago, I want to say. I first read Full Moon Halloween and They Call Me Creature like a couple years ago and did individual reviews for those books. And then I've kind of been gradually reading through the other ones through that time. And just recently I kind of rushed through the series a little bit. I only had like four or five books to go, and I just kind of read the last few over these last couple of months. And overall, I'm pretty excited to say that this is mostly a really good series. It reminds me a little bit of Series 2000 in the sense that it's a lot darker and more mature than the typical Goosebumps book or typical horror book R.L. Stine does for kids. He tends to be a little bit more edgy in some of these books. Some of them are a lot more violent than what we normally see in these. And it's also pretty consistent for the most part, kind of like Series 2000 as well. There's really not any book in this series that I would say is terrible. These first few are kind of meh that I'll be talking about. I'm not really a big fan of these, but I wouldn't say that there's any book in this series that's truly terrible. Not any of them that I hated or anything like that. But as usual with these ranking videos, I'm going to be going from worst to best, in my opinion, of course. And yeah, there's a total of 12 books in this series, 12 books in the main part of the series, and then there's also a trilogy, which is called Thrilogy, a three-part story that's kind of split up from the main series. They're numbered 1, 2, and 3, but I'll also be ranking those. And let's just jump right into it. So I have my notes here with me. So in case I keep glancing down, I'm looking at my notes in case I forget which number or which book I'm at, which I often do in these types of videos. It's hard for me to keep track. So yeah, let's just jump right into it and start with the very worst Nightmare Room book, in my opinion, of course. And I think some of you might be surprised at this one, but we'll see. So my least favorite in the Nightmare Room series, coming in at number 15, is The Visitors. This is actually book number 12, the last book in the main part of the series. And the reason this one is at the bottom for me is because this one is essentially the You Gotta Believe Me plotline, where it's the main character trying to convince his friends, his parents, pretty much every character that exists in the story of the threat, in which case it is aliens invading in this book here. This is essentially Invasion of the Body Squeezers from Series 2000. That's literally what this book is. And it's just so repetitive. The main character is literally obsessed with aliens. He believes that aliens are real. He spends all of his time either on his computer in online chat rooms, chatting with other believers, and then just going around trying to convince other people that the aliens are about to invade. And that's pretty much the entire plot of this book. It takes up the majority of its length. And then the aliens, there are actual aliens in this story, but they don't actually invade or come into the story until the very end, the last, I don't know, 20 or 30 pages maybe. And there is some kind of cool stuff that happens towards the climax of this one when we finally do get to the alien stuff, but it is just too little and too late. And yeah, this is just way too much of that You Gotta Believe Me. If you've read several Goosebumps books by now, you'll know what I'm talking about. Occasionally R.L. Stine does this where he just makes the main characters have a very low IQ and their entire thing is they feel like they just have to convince people that the monster is real. And it's just infuriating. It's just very frustrating. So yeah, while not completely terrible, I've read worse books by R.L. Stine. I still gave this one a 2 out of 5 stars. It's just that whole thing just kind of ruined this one for me. So yeah, Visitors is at my very bottom spot for the Nightmare Room. All right, coming in at number 14 is Liar Liar. Now, this is one that I don't remember a whole lot, if I'm being honest. It's basically about this kid who, well, he's a liar, and it gets him into trouble. From what I remember, he lies so much that he gets sent to this alternate dimension kind of thing, something like that. And from there, it's just a lot of weird and crazy stuff happens. And it's supposed to be kind of like a moral story about the boy who cried wolf, I think, kind of. He ends up lying so much that he gets him in trouble, and then when he's in this alternate dimension, I think he's trying to tell the truth or trying to seek out help, and of course nobody believes him. And there's just this is just one of those ones to me that's a bit nonsensical. And sometimes those ones are kind of fun, but this one is just too nonsensical for my tastes. This one does not have very much plot coherence to it, and it just feels like R.L. Stine is just kind of throwing the kitchen sink at you. And this one, yeah, it just, I don't know. It was okay, I guess. It just didn't really make a lot of sense. And like I said, the fact that I don't remember this one very much and a lot of the events that happened in it speaks to the fact that it wasn't very memorable, I guess. So yeah, Liar Liar, 2 out of 5 stars for this one as well, and it comes in at my number 14 spot. All right, coming in at number 13, we have Shadow Girl. Now, this is one that I don't necessarily think is a bad book. I know some people really like this one, but this is one of those like superhero comic book type stories that R.L. Stine does occasionally. R.L. Stine himself is a fan of comics and that kind of thing. And it seems like in every series, or almost every series he does, Goosebumps and otherwise, he has like at least one entry dedicated to like comic book superheroes, that kind of like genre. And this is the one case for this series here. And that is just something that doesn't appeal to me personally. I've never been a fan of that kind of stuff. I don't know why. It's just not really my cup of tea. So yeah, I don't necessarily think this is a bad book. This is just one I didn't get that much enjoyment out of because it's all about this girl named Shadow Girl, I guess, and she moves to a new town, and I think she goes to live with like her aunt or her cousin or something like that, if I remember correctly. And it turns out that they're like superheroes as well and have these powers and stuff. And it's just kind of whatever. I don't know. Yeah, 2 out of 5 stars for this one as well. Not bad, not great. This one just really isn't my cup of tea. So yeah, Shadow Girl comes in at number 13. All right, moving on to number 12 in my ranking. And we have The Howler. This one is number 7 in the series. Now, this is one that reminds me a little bit of Ghost in the Mirror from Series 2000 in the sense that it starts out really, really strong. This one has a really dark and eerie setup. This is one that really explores some of the more mature themes that we often see in this series. There's some pretty messed up stuff that happens like within the first couple of chapters of this book, and I really liked what it was setting up in the beginning. Unfortunately, the second half of the story here feels like something completely different. It completely veers away from what the story was setting up, story-wise, and like the tone of everything and that it was going for. And it just feels like a completely different story than what we got in the first half. And it was very disappointing to me. This one just goes in some really bizarre directions, and it just did not feel like it meshed well. It just, I don't know, this one just kind of felt all over the place. And it just ended up being a slight disappointment for me. And overall, it wasn't too bad. It's slightly better than these other ones. I think I gave this one a 2.5 out of 5 stars. I really liked some of the stuff in here. It just overall just didn't feel well put together, well executed. There's some good ideas here, but it just felt kind of lazily and sloppily thrown together, in my opinion. So yeah, The Howler comes in at number 12 on my list. Okay, the next 3 spots in my ranking are all part of the trilogy. And I decided to lump these together because it's essentially one story being split up into 3 books. However, I will be ranking these 3 books individually because there are varying levels of quality among them, in my opinion. So coming in at number 11 is actually the last book in the trilogy. And this is part 3, No Survivors. And I'll talk a little bit more about this trilogy in the next 2 books and like what it's about. But I'll just say that overall, I was really disappointed with the direction this went, especially the end. The last book, it just was such a huge disappointment. It started out okay and was kind of carrying over what the first 2 books were setting up. But then like about halfway through, this one just started sinking for me. It kind of just went through the motions again of the first book, and it made what happened earlier in this trilogy feel really just kind of unnecessary and there for just padding. And the direction that this goes in at the very end, the climax to like this big 3-part, series. R.L. Stine doesn't normally do this kind of thing. It just was very, very anticlimactic. It was a huge letdown. And yeah, I was just really disappointed with it. I gave this book like a 2 out of 5 stars because I did not like the direction it went in. The ending sucked, frankly. So yeah, this is the third part is definitely my least favorite of the trilogy. And coming up at number 10 on my ranking in the next trilogy book is the very first one. Now, this one has some really interesting ideas. So basically what this trilogy is about is it's about these kids that are sent to this isolated private island where they're part of a game show called Life Games. The title of the book is called Fear Games, but on the back of the book here, it's called the Life Games competition that they're in. And basically, it's kind of like a Survivor game show, essentially, and they have to do these different challenges on the island. They have to survive on this island for a certain amount of time. And the winner of this competition, and I believe it's split up into 3 teams, and there's like 4 kids on each teams. And the winner of the team, or the winning team, receives a $100,000 prize, that's a pretty big prize. That's a lot of money for a few, middle grade kids. And so yeah, they're basically on this island surviving, and some weird stuff starts to happen on this island. And then we also get like halfway through this book a chapter that takes place back in like the 1800s, and there is this teen girl who is accused of being a witch in like this small town village somewhere. And some of these ideas that it sets up are really interesting, and we very slowly, gradually get our like reveals as to how the past and like this witchcraft stuff sort of ties into the present, how it ties into this island that the kids are on. It doesn't really go too far with it in this first book. It just feels like it's kind of setting it up. So this first book, it was just okay. The whole island thing in the game show really felt like a camp story to me, like Camp Nightmare or Ghost Camp. During this game show, some of the kids are like slowly disappearing, and the main character suspects that there's something wrong with this island. It's not part of just the normal competition. Something is strange going on. The adults and the authority figures in the story are acting very strange and aren't giving the kids all the information. So it feels a lot like a camp story. And this one was okay, I guess. It sets up some interesting ideas, but there's just a lot of ambiguity. And it's just, yeah, I don't know. It was okay, I guess. It's like a 2.5 out of 5 stars for me, and it comes in at number 10 on my ranking. And then my favorite, coming in at number 9 in my ranking, and my absolute favorite book in the trilogy, is What Scares You the Most, the second part. Now, this trilogy as a whole has some really dark stuff in it, and pretty like mature stuff that's pretty common throughout this series. But the second book turns things up to 11. There are some really, really violent and disturbing things in the second book, and I absolutely loved it. This is definitely the strongest entry in this trilogy, and the one that I enjoyed the most. And it feels like this one did a lot better job of setting up the story than the first book did. And even though the third one was a huge letdown, this one to me, it was just the most enjoyable and feels like the most like coherent story here. And a lot of this book doesn't actually take place on the island. They complete the competition. I think they end up winning, the main character. And then they go back home where strange stuff starts to happen. We get another few chapters in this book with the past revealing more of what happened with the witch and this island and how she ties into it. And like I said, there's some really interesting ideas here with this, but it just feels like it was not executed in the best way possible. But I really did enjoy the chapters we got taking place in the past, like in the 1800s. There was actually one scene in this book that scared the crap out of me. I was reading this late at night, and I was reading them chapters that took place in like the 1800s that dealing with the witchcraft. And I was just about to put this book down for the night and go to bed. So I was kind of tired in reading it. And one scene that I got to completely like startled me awake and like shocked me for how violent and just disturbing it was for these types of books. I was not expecting it. One of the most scariest and like gruesome things I've ever read from R.L. Stine, honestly. It was fantastic. I loved it. It creeped me the hell out, but I loved it, every minute of it. So yeah, this was definitely the strongest entry I feel in the trilogy. It's just shame that as a whole it was executed so poorly, in my opinion at least, and that's why I decided to rank this trilogy as low as I did. If I had isolated these books, this one would probably be higher up on my list. But I feel like since it's one story essentially split up into 3 parts, I had to kind of lump them together. So yeah, this one comes in at number 9 on my ranking. Okay, moving on to number 8 in my ranking. And we have My Name is Evil. This is book number 3 in the series. Now, this is one that when I first read it, I initially didn't rate it very highly. I think I gave it like a 2.5 out of 5 stars or something. But after finishing through the entire series, I've adjusted my ratings for some of these a little bit, just like rating them in comparison with the other books in the series. And looking back, I decided to round this one up to a solid 3 out of 5 stars. I think I enjoyed this one for the most part, even though it does have some flaws. The ending's a little bit rushed. It doesn't have the most satisfying like twist and ending ever. But I think this one is mostly good. This one is like decent good. And it's basically about this girl that they go to see like this fortune teller or something with their friends, I think. And this fortune teller basically is scared of this girl and proclaims that she has evil powers, and you need to tells her friends that you need to stay away from her, that kind of thing. And of course, they don't really take it too seriously at first, but then bad things start happening, and it always involves our main character, and she has to deal with like the guilt of the situation, even though she knows she's not doing any of these things intentionally, and she's wondering if she really does have evil powers. And this is kind of a tragic story because she's like close friends with these other 3 girls, and just these bad things start happening to all of them, and it seems like it's out of her control, and she's like trying to figure out what's going on, and she feels terrible about it. So there's some nice emotion to this story that I really enjoyed. I kind of just like the concept of this one, but by the ending of it, I remember it just being a little bit disappointing with like the climax and the resolution of the story and everything, and it didn't really rise above like 3 stars for me. So yeah, it's still decent good, just not one of my favorites of the series. So yeah, that's My Name is Evil, coming in at number 8 on my ranking. Okay, coming in at number 7. This one is also like a straight 3 out of 5 stars for me. This one, My Name is Evil, and then the next one I have up on my ranking, honestly, are all interchangeable for me. I had a really hard time deciding where to place these books in my ranking, but I just decided to go with this for now. But they're all pretty much interchangeable, honestly. I gave them all about the same rating. So yeah, the next one, number 7, is Scare School. And this one is basically about this kid attending this school that's ruled by this little creature we see on the front here. And he is an imp that has like these different powers and such. And he basically terrorizes this school and everybody in it. And he like plays pranks on them, and he basically like survives by causing mischief and mayhem and just playing these different pranks on people and basically striking fear into all of these kids and the teachers and things like that. And this one really feels like kind of like a fantasy, like fairy tale to me. And I really appreciate that about it for being a bit different, a bit more unique. This one establishes like almost from the start of the book that this imp creature is real. There's not really much of a mystery around this one, like what's real, what's not. There's not a lot of fake out scares. It establishes very early on that this imp creature is real. The main character doesn't have to convince anybody in the school about, this monster terrorizing him. Everyone already knows it, and they live in fear of this creature. And also what I like about this book is the main character is very proactive in trying to figure out how to defeat this creature, which is not something we see too often in these types of books. Usually R.L. Stine tries to make us feel afraid by having the main character kind of a scaredy cat himself and just very fearful of the situation and unsure of what to do. But in this case, the main character is very proactive in trying to figure out how to defeat this imp-like creature that is basically overpowering the school and like just running around and causing mayhem and different terrible things to happen. And I really like that. This one just offers a more unique flavor, something that we haven't seen very often from R.L. Stine. And yeah, I give this one a straight 3 out of 5. The ending was decent too. It does have kind of like a little twist there at the end that it's not bad. It's not like a great twist or anything, but it's not one of those stupid twists either that ruin one of the stories. And yeah, this one is just like a straight 3 out of 5 stars for me. So yeah, Scare School. This is book number 11 in the series, by the way. And this one comes in at number 7 in my ranking. Okay, moving on to number 6. Now, I was surprised that this book made it as high as it did on my ranking. And again, this one is kind of interchangeable with the last two, if I'm being honest. I gave it about the same rating, and that is Camp Nowhere. This one is book number 9 in the series. Now, this one also is kind of unique in the sense that it just feels different than what R.L. Stine has done before. This is one that really subverted my expectations and caught me off guard a little bit with just some of the directions the story went with this one. And what I liked about it is this one is one of those more believable, relatable R.L. Stine books where there's not a lot of obviously supernatural stuff going on right away. The characters feel more real. Everything feels pretty grounded in reality for the most part, and a lot of it is just these kids in this summer camp and like trying to survive in the wilderness, that kind of thing. And eventually we do get to the camp nowhere in question, the title of the book, and then we get introduced to some supernatural elements. But most of the book just feels like a pretty grounded, like survival type story, and it's just something a little bit different, something that I haven't really seen before from R.L. Stine, and I kind of appreciate when we get these more unique titles like this, having read as many Goosebumps books that I have. So yeah, this one was decent for the most part. I liked it. Like I said, about the same as the last two, 3 out of 5 stars, maybe like a 3.25. This one also did feel a little bit rushed towards the end, which is a complaint that I have with a lot of the books in this series. The endings and like the climax just feels a little bit rushed and doesn't really cover all the bases or tie up all the loose ends of the story. But I can't complain too much for that or knock off too many points. Like I said, a lot of the books in this series do that. But overall, yeah, this was a pretty solid one. So that's Camp Nowhere. It comes in at number 6 on my ranking. Okay, we are at the top 5 in my ranking of the Nightmare Room series. And from here on out, all of these books are really good to great. And these are all ones that I would probably consider rereading again in the future. While I enjoy this series for the most part and a lot of these other books that I just talked about, these next 5 are ones that I feel like are really, truly the highlights of this series. And these ones are all like 3.5 to 4 stars and up. So at number 5, we have the 10th book in the Nightmare Room series, and that is Full Moon Halloween. Now, I didn't really read the Nightmare Room series a lot when I was a kid. I just read whatever R.L. Stine books that my local library had, which was mostly the Goosebumps. But I do remember reading this one as a kid. I don't remember how I got it. Actually, I think my little brother had a copy of this book. I don't remember how he got it, and I remember reading it. And rereading it as an adult, I can say that this one is still one of my favorites. This one is a really solid book. It's essentially about these kids that are kidnapped by this guy and held hostage in his house, and he's convinced that one of them is a werewolf. And he goes through these series of like tests, and he's basically like torturing them, like not physically torturing them, but basically like forcing them through these tests and different things, and like interrogating these kids and like trying to figure out which one of them is a werewolf. And it's very, very dark. And I really loved it. Of course, if you know me, you know I love werewolf stories, and that's basically what this is. But it deals more with like the human nature, like the evil characters, than it does like the monsters in the story. Like I said, there's some very dark stuff in this one. The whole theme, or the whole concept of this guy basically kidnapping these kids is kind of messed up. And the thing about this book that does bring it down for me a little bit is the characters are a bit flat in this one. I didn't really get much emotional attachment to like the main character or his friends. I feel like they're completely defined by the situation that they're in, being locked in this guy's house, which is a pretty serious situation, don't get me wrong. But I just feel like there wasn't much of an emotional connection to be made there, which is really the main negative I have, which keeps me from rating this one higher. And I initially gave this book a 3.5 out of 5 stars. When I read it, I could probably round it up to like a 4 stars, like a low 4 stars. But in the ending to this one too, I wasn't a big fan of the twist that we get in this book. It's not a bad twist. It's one we've seen before from R.L. Stine. But I feel like the nature of this book, it doesn't fit well with this. I would have preferred to keep things on the more grounded, more realistic level and not get like the kind of supernatural twist that we get in this book, because I just feel like it didn't fit with the rest of the story. I would have preferred not having it here. But it is a twist that's not bad. It's one we've seen in other Goosebumps books and such. But overall, this was still a good one. It's in my top 5 of the Nightmare Room series. So yeah, that's Full Moon Halloween. Probably like a 4 out of 5 stars for this one. And yeah, let's keep moving. At book number 4, this one might surprise some people because I know I didn't do an individual review for this one. I don't think I've talked about it much, but this was a really good one. I mean, it comes in at number 4 in my ranking, and it is the very first book in the Nightmare Room series, and that is Don't Forget Me. Now, I initially gave this one the same star rating as Full Moon Halloween, but I decided to put this one just above that because this one has much more of an emotional connection to it. The characters feel a lot more believable. You get more attached to the characters in this book. And from what I remember, this one is basically about these kids that move into this new house, and I'm already forgetting some of what happens or how the plot progresses, but they basically start losing their memories for some reason, and they're like the kids and their parents slowly start getting this amnesia, and they have to try to things just keep getting worse and worse, and then they have to try to figure out how to stop this progressive amnesia that they're getting. And this one just feels really sad, honestly. This is a very emotional title, which I think is what I liked about it. You really feel for the characters in this book, and I just remember this being a really good one that I enjoyed, even though for whatever reason a lot of the story has already left my memory. But yeah, I gave this one a 3.5. I decided to round it up to 4 stars. And this is the very first book in the series. I feel like it starts off on a pretty strong note. It's not as dark as some of the other books in the series. It's not really too violent or horrific or anything. But this is just a really solid one that I enjoyed. So yeah, it comes in at number 4 on my ranking. All right, we are at the top 3. These last 3 books are ones that I absolutely adore, and all get a solid 4 stars and up. So, coming in at number 3 on my ranking is one that I just read, and that is book number 5 in the series, Dear Diary, I'm Dead. This one really shocked me. I did not expect to enjoy this book as much as I did. I just did a review for this one. If you want to watch that, I can talk about that book more in depth there. But this one is basically about this kid who gets this diary that has entries in it that are in his own handwriting, and it appears that he himself is writing it from the future, like a future version of himself. So he uses this diary to his advantage, to where it's predicting the future, and he basically takes advantage of this and makes bets with his friends in order to make money, that kind of thing. And eventually some of these diary entries that he reads that of the next days or whatever start predicting bad things that happen, and of course they do come to pass. And he soon learns that this diary is more bad than it is good, and things just slowly escalate and keep getting worse and worse. And I really love this book. This one deals a lot with the themes that I kind of like in Goosebumps, dealing with fear and paranoia. And yeah, this one just really landed for me. I just did an individual review for this one, so if you want to hear me talk about this book more, go check that out. But I gave this one a solid 4 out of 5 stars. The only thing I didn't really care for about it was the ending was very abrupt. It almost doesn't even have a proper ending. On one hand, I kind of don't mind it because it feels like sort of a tragic, ends on a sad note, and it kind of fits with the theme of this diary and having diary entries. And it's he just stops. He's in the situation that the character is in. He's not able to make another diary entry. So it kind of makes sense to end sort of abruptly. But I think this one was just a little bit too abrupt, if that makes sense. And then the last chapter to this book, it doesn't need to be there. I don't even know why it exists. So yeah, those 2 flaws for me brought the book down a little bit, but I still really enjoyed it overall. This was just a really fun book. 4 out of 5 stars for this one. It comes in at my number 3 spot. All right, we are at the top 2. And my second favorite Nightmare Room book is They Call Me Creature. Now, this one is a little bit of a mashup of Stay Out of the Basement and Werewolf of Fever Swamp from the original Goosebumps series. It's about this girl named Laura who moves out to this, I think, sort of small town somewhere with her dad. Her parents are divorced. And they move out kind of in a wooded area. There's a swamp and some woods out behind their house. And Laura really enjoys photographing wildlife in nature. She's an animal lover, that kind of thing, which is kind of relatable. I kind of like that. I'm sort of that way myself. So it's kind of sets up like this sad situation. Her father is sort of absent and kind of withdrawn. He doesn't really spend a lot of time with Laura. He's like a scientist or something, if I remember correctly, and he's kind of like just locked away in the basement or like in his tool shed, just like working on some secret experiment or something, and he doesn't ever tell Laura what it is. And then Laura also like starts discovering some strange things and some weird animals out in the forest, and she's trying to figure out what's going on. And so yeah, this one has like some elements from some of those original Goosebumps books, but it's done in a way here just really really well executed in my opinion. The character of Laura is really believable. You get attached to her for sure, especially with this sort of like tragic situation she's in, or she feels like her parents don't care about her at all, which I mean they kind of don't. And this is just a really like heartfelt one, but it also has some of like the darkest stuff in the entire Nightmare Room series can be found in this book. Like I said, as a whole, the Nightmare Room series, sort of like Series 2000 from Goosebumps, just has some really like edgy, more violent stuff than you would typically see in these. And this one has one scene, or a couple of scenes in particular, that really, really push the boundaries of what should be allowed in these kids' books, and I enjoy every minute of it. There's some pretty gory stuff in this book, and it's awesome. Where this book falls short for me is kind of like a lot of the other books in this series. The ending just feels a little bit rushed. There's a couple loose ends. Not everything is fully explained, and then the final like twist that we get at the end, it's just kind of whatever. It's it's like R.L. Stine trying to throw in like one last little surprise that doesn't need to be there. You know, R.L. Stine, not every single book you write has to have like one final surprise or twist at the end. You can just end the book on like a normal happy note once in a while, and that would be fine. But yeah, They Call Me Creature comes in at number 2 on my list. Solid 4 out of 5 stars for this one as well. So yeah. All right, we are on to my number 1 absolute favorite book from the Nightmare Room series. No question about it. And that is Locker 13. This is book number 2, the very second book in the series. And speaking of like rushed endings and like stupid twists in books, this one of the reasons I like this one anyway is because it doesn't really have that. There is a little bit of like odd pacing towards the end with like the climax and stuff. Some of it does feel slightly rushed through, but this one has a great ending. I love the note that this book ends on. There's no stupid twist to this one, and the very like last sentence that this book ends on feels very like profound and fits perfectly with the rest of this book. This one just has like a normal happy ending, which is the way it should be. I wish R.L. Stine did that more often. So yeah, this one is basically about this locker at their school, and there's sort of this mysterious, I don't even know what to call him. It's like entity creature known as the Fate Master in this book. And through certain objects and like through the powers that this Fate Master has, he causes bad things to happen. He causes bad luck for certain characters. And the main character has to basically try to figure out how to defeat this Fate Master and stop these bad things from happening. So this one is kind of similar to Dear Diary, I'm Dead. It has a lot of the same themes in dealing with like the fear and paranoia of certain situations, and having to go to certain lengths to protect yourself and then also protect your loved ones from, you know, these just different like bad events that are happening. And this one just hit all the right notes for me. I absolutely love this book. I give this one a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Not quite perfect for me. Just a few minor nitpicks I had with it. But overall, this one is definitely my favorite book in the series. This one has that emotional connection to it. I like the characters in it. I liked almost everything about this book. And the way it ends too is just, it's great. There's no stupid twist in here that doesn't make sense, anything like that. And I like these types of books that have sort of like a cursed object, but they play on a lot of themes, different themes, and like have layers to the story and meaning to it. And this one, it really dives into that a lot deeper than any other Nightmare Room book does. I feel like one of the messages of this book is like, instead of waiting around for like fate to happen or like things to happen or to wait for like good luck to come to you, about like going out and having to defeat fate like through hard work and like dedication and that kind of thing. So this one does have like kind of a good moral to it, and does dive, like I said, kind of deep into some of those themes. And I just really liked it for that reason. It's relatable. I like the characters in here, the plot. The Fate Master is a very like menacing and like creative villain, and I absolutely loved him. There's a little bit of ambiguity surrounding this villain and like his origins and that kind of thing, but it's okay. That's really nothing that I deducted points for. And yeah, overall, this was just a really solid book. I don't have too much negative to say about it. I mean, it's at my number one spot. Definitely my favorite Nightmare Room book. Again, couple minor nitpicks I have with it. It's like a 4.5 out of 5 stars. But yeah, The Locker 13, the second book in the series, is my all-time favorite Nightmare Room book. And that is it, guys. That is my ranking of the Nightmare Room series by R.L. Stine. Overall, this was a really good series, minus like the first or like the bottom 3 to 4 books I talked about. The rest of the series is pretty strong for the most part. I would definitely recommend checking it out if it sounds like something you're interested in. It's basically the same thing as Goosebumps, but a little bit darker. There's some more violent and mature stuff in these books. R.L. Stine definitely pushes the boundaries of what he typically does in these. And then with like my top 5 books being ones that I would highly recommend, and I would probably myself reread in the future. And that's it, guys. That's my ranking of the Nightmare Room series. Let me know if you've read these books. If you do, I'd love to hear what your ranking of them is, or like your least favorite or your favorite ones. And that's all I have for today, guys. So thanks for watching. See you next time.